So this is the last in the series that we have been doing on racism. And I was trying to figure out the best way. Uh-oh.
It's restarting.
Oh. Well, you'll see my lovely pictures eventually. And then I'll explain them. It seems like there have been a lot of technical difficulties and whatnot going on lately. Our heat went off this morning, so that was not great. We've had some problems with media and whatever. Anyway, but we're here together. Thank you. And thank you for being here. So we've been talking about the ways that we can understand racism and how to address that. And one of the main things that we started in our discussion talking about is that to be justice and righteousness in this world and live out this conviction that our conference has for our church, that racism is not compatible with Christian teaching. It's also really complex and nuanced, and we have to be willing and vulnerable to be open to what it is that Jesus reveals to us in it. If we're going to make disciples for the transformation of the world, the whole world, we have to, have some good relations and relationships with one another. So to live out this conviction, if you are convicted that this is not compatible with Christian teaching, and justice and righteousness going together means recognizing that justice needs to happen, but righteousness knowing that we need to do something about it, making things right in this world. The first thing that we need to know is that God is pleased with us. Before we can start seeing God in other people, we have to know God in us, right? He's pleased with us. God's pleased with us. We don't have to be superhuman. There are different ways that we do it, right? So we're just enough. That was the second thing we talked about. We are enough. We are fully equipped to be justice and righteousness. That we're better together. In fact, we're created to be together and to be unified, to be of one people, of one mind. Different gifts, absolutely. Different ways of thinking, definitely. Praise God, because if we all thought the same way, we would never figure anything out, right? That it's not a vocation, just a vocation. That it is a vocation. It's not just a thing to do. It's a way of being. It's a just calling. And we also consider what justice looks like, to be known as people who do something about injustices and work toward making things right. A people that can be trusted. Are we a trusted people? A place where it's safe, empowered by the Spirit of God. And that God is the one. We do the work, we collaborate with God, but God is the one who causes growth. And for transformation to occur, it is crucial that we just grow up. And that's what I want to talk about today. Growing up means that we have a broader view, right? Our perspective becomes more expansive. We move beyond object permanence. We're no longer toddlers. We know that if I put something behind my back, it still exists, right? We can do that. Our brains can also think a little bit more expansively and see around perspectives. We just don't always do that. But we have the ability to do that. To be capable of meeting someone from a different neighborhood or culture and to learn and understand about that person. So, for instance, Alan Hernandez lives in LA and he describes himself this way. He says, I am indigenous, I am Mayan, and I am a Christian. And he has on his arms, he has tattoos. On one arm, the deity worshipped by the Yucatan Mayan people, and on the other, he has the praying hands of Jesus. And those cultures clashed. In fact, one tried to annihilate the other. but he tattooed him on his arms because it's part of who he is, his formation, and also informs the way that he moves about and is a Christian in this world. Latinx Christians often feel in the spiritual borderlands. They have both Spanish heritage and are indigenous. People make assumptions immediately about their socioeconomic status, their religious and political preferences, and about their citizenship. People do that automatically oftentimes. Their very identity is instantly presumed. When somebody is different from you, you make assumptions. How might that information impact my own view of spirituality, my role as a Christian in the world, in this world, a world of people? We are complex beings. That's Clark and his cousin, Jonas. Obviously, they were quite young, but trying to act like grown-ups. We're complex, multifaceted. But God tells the people in Deuteronomy, I give you life and everything that you need. I give it to you. You don't need a magic vase. All will be right in the world. In your world, all will be well. But if your heart turns against itself, this is what he's saying in Deuteronomy. That is, if you forget who you are and from where you came, from whom your very life came into being, heaven and earth are witness to your life going to hell in a handbasket. It did say hell, not the handbasket part. Choose to live. Choose life. Choose to live your life to the fullest by loving God with everything and your neighbor as yourself. That would be everyone. Because I want to show you what God says in a few chapters back in chapter 23, 14 to 16. Because the Lord your God travels along with your camp. Your camp must be holy, so that God may not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. Slaves who have escaped to you from their owners shall not be given back to them. They shall reside with you in your midst, in any place that they choose, in any one of your towns, wherever they please. You shall not oppress them. That seems pretty clear to me. God's saying that once you get this land that you did nothing to make, share it. I give you life and all that you need. It's a gift. Now show your great love for me and share. Nothing we do is in a vacuum. There are always innumerable people and factors that collaborate to bring you, as you are, to this time and place. Lots of things impacted how you are right now and here. I love this quote from a book that I recently read. No art ever came about, but it was an act of collaboration. Even something that is our original work, it didn't come just from my brain or what my abilities or whatever. We are inspired by one another, we grow from one another, we learn from one another. It's an act of collaboration, always. So when we talk about some of the arguments that happen when we're talking about economics, because a lot of what our prejudices are about have to do with the way that we view who has the right to have money. Poverty is judged, it's part of this whole racism thing. So when you hold a majority of resources, it's hard to give it up. Just like the old woman. She wanted more, and then it backfired just a little bit for her. So there's this report that a friend of mine showed me. My sister-in-law also is a financial advisor, and so some of this is informed by this. They did this report of the 100 most overpaid CEOs in 2019. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which became effective in 2018, has been called a giveaway to corporations, which use their huge tax savings, so they had some taxes saved, to buy back their own stock instead of creating more jobs or raising worker pay. The $4,000 a year that was promised, as supporters claimed would happen. Now, this didn't happen across the board, but they found it, they were alarmed by how many did this. Many new laws are now in place to curb these abuses. There are certain loopholes that were addressed, and the 2010 Dodd-Frank Finance Reform Bill, which I'm sure you know all about, requires companies to disclose, to report the pay ratio between CEOs and their median range employees. And Oregon, the state of Oregon for one, now bases tax rates on those disclosures. So if there's a larger ratio between the median worker pay and the CEO's salary, they will be taxed more. Investors and others who wield significant control over our economic resources are starting to see how abuses of power are not good for, well, the economy. It's backfiring on them. So from this one report, institutional investors have increasingly begun to realize that inequality has the potential to negatively impact institutional investors' portfolios. It just doesn't happen. Things don't go well for them if they aren't fair in their dealings. Lower output, slow economic growth, the rise of nationalistic populism and tendencies toward isolationism and protection. They protect their assets. When I looked at this information, I think, phew, how many of us make enough money to even invest like this? I mean, it doesn't even register on, in our checkbook. Even 401ks are being phased out, and employers are holding back on pension plans for a significant percentage of workers. It's a lot of people don't even have retirement. When the median employee compensation for 104 of the top companies is below the federal poverty level of $25,750 for a family of 4, there's a problem. When the CEO is making tens or hundreds of billions of dollars and paying their workers below the poverty level, and so that the government has to compensate, there's a problem. It's not just. Paul tells the Corinthian church, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but rather as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for solid food. Even now you are still not ready, for you are still in the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not in the flesh and behaving according to human inclinations? For when one says, I belong to Paul, and another, I belong to Apollos, are you not merely human? And I love how Paul says this. He's basically saying, you keep trying to elevate yourselves, make yourselves seem important by aligning with certain people or ideas, crushing others by declaring their inadequacies based on superficial things, unimportant things. But you're no God. You're human. God is the one who causes growth. So grow up. Whatever it is that you do out of your giftedness, out of your talents, privilege, or hardship, whatever you do, we absolutely must work together because we are working toward a common goal. We are working toward the same thing. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose. That's us. We water and we plant. For we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. We house, God dwells in us. So learn from each other, even those with whom you're uncomfortable sharing space. heard the name Rosa Parks, yes? That's a pretty well-known name. What about Martin Luther King, Jr.? Probably heard of him. But have you heard the name James Cone? Some of you might have. He's a theologian. He laid the foundation for what is called liberation theology that spoke directly to the injustices, oppression, and violence faced by the Black community in the United States. So Jesus made clear, and he's saying this, Jesus made clear that he came to bring good news to the poor. You've heard that, right? Jesus came to bring good news to the poor, showing that if we liberated the people on our margins, the good news would float upward in the opposite direction of the trickle-down economic model, which is largely an illusion. Jesus' teaching empowered Reverend Dr. Cone to write any message that is not related to the liberation of the poor in a society is not Christ's message. It's a pretty strong statement, but there's a lot that backs that up. Any theology that is different to the theme of liberation is not Christian theology, because that's what Jesus came to do, to liberate. It's also what Lysander means, liberator. So you've got work to do, dude. Another name you probably haven't heard of is Mary McLeod Bethune. Ah, some people have. Who's heard of her? All right, Bev, gold star. She said famously, and it's such a beautiful statement, invest in the human soul. Who knows, it might be a diamond in the rough. You don't know, but invest. Invest in one another. This incredibly accomplished public servant founded the school that became Bethune-Cookman College, as well as a training school for nurses. She advised the White House, founded the National Council of Negro Women, worked towards integration of the Red Cross, and served 4 times as a delegate to General Conference. She recognized the importance of access to education and devoted a significant portion of her life to educational issues. She founded Daytona Educational and Industrial Training School for Negro Girls in 1994. In 23, it merged with the Cookman Institute and became a co-educational college. Anyway, she just so many things, and I have it all listed here, and it'll be on the website and links too, because it's so important that we know these human beings that shaped our denomination and shaped the world, our country and the world. She, during the Roosevelt administration, advised the White House on minority affairs and advised 5 U.S. presidents. This single woman here, well, she wasn't single, she had kids, lone woman, was the only Black woman present at the founding of the United Nations in 1945. I mean, just to be there is pretty incredible. And after her death, she became the first Black woman to be honored with a statue in Washington, D.C. She's pretty important to this country. She unified some aspects of the United Methodist Church because it was divided along color lines. And she identified proudly as a Methodist woman in mission until her death in 55. Here is a human being who grew up, who was just and righteous, living out her faith. She was a grown-up. I want to be like her. But I never heard of her until I became a Methodist. The more I learn about slavery in America, the more I realize the predominance of Black women and so many women who were instrumental in ushering slaves to freedom. These stories did not feature in my social studies curricula, or just maybe a little bit, one or 2 stories here and there. Would not our faith strengthen, our feet feel on firmer ground, if we understood the spectacular faith of so many saints. Those who planted and watered alongside us, often unbeknownst to us. How much more secure and full of faith we would be if we had more people with us instead of finding divisions and ways to divide, to not be unified. Jesus says in Matthew, "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult your brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire." There it is. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, remember, if a brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift. Be reconciled. Go to them and then offer your gift. It goes on to say, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it out. It's better to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go to hell. Do you really think that Jesus is saying, literally, go cut off your right hand? Does anyone believe that? It'd be messy. I was talking with a colleague of mine this week, and his comment on this passage was, to what lengths will you go to show your love? Isn't that what Jesus is saying? How far will you go to display your love for God? Because if I've learned anything through this series about what God means by God's command to love the Lord with everything, we know it doesn't mean touting platitudes. It doesn't mean going to church regularly or serving on some committee. You show your love to God by doing justice, loving mercy, walking humbly, which means don't make distinctions between one another. Refrain from making difference a thing. It means grow up and start eating solid food. Prepare your meals. Stop expecting to be breastfed when you know how to cook. And making meals together is so much better, too, right? Because, face it, even the best of us have trouble keeping track of all the pots on the stove. Definitely burned many things when I tried to do it all on my own. We can learn from each other, learn how to cook meals in both the figurative and the literal sense. Eat with them, change our perspectives on what delicious means. It means we learn from each other, even those with whom we are uncomfortable or whom we don't understand, or those whose ways are so different we might even think it's wrong. Learn from them first before you pass the judgment. Mary McLeod Bethune passed away in 1955, and she leaves a lasting will and testament full of wisdom and love. She says, "I leave you love. Love thy neighbor is a precept which could transform the world if it were universally practiced, if we practiced it together." She says, "I leave you hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you respect for the use of power. I leave you faith. I leave you racial dignity. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow man. I leave you, finally, a responsibility to our young people. If I have a legacy to leave my people, it is my philosophy of living and serving. I think I have spent my life well. I pray now that my philosophy may be helpful to those who share my vision of a world of peace, progress, brotherhood, love." Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." If you believe God exists, and that Jesus is who he says he is, and we say, yes, I believe, then we must live into that reality. That means who we have already been learning, we who have already been learning, being discipled, will go out, because we've all learned a lot of stuff. We go out now and disciple others. We are that witness of God's love to others. Jesus' redemptive power, the Spirit's outpouring of grace and love in this world. That's what it means to grow up. Live it out. It means to know that God is pleased with us, that we're just enough, that the church needs to be unified, that it's a calling, and that to be known as people who do something about injustices and work to make things right, just evidence of a people that can be trusted, a people who are safe, empowered by the Spirit of God, and that God is the one who brings the growth. And for transformation to occur is crucial that we just grow up. I want to be a just grown up. What will it look for us to be just grown-ups? Let's talk about it. Amen.